Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. Welcome to the Society for Biomaterials webinar on working with the media. I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Don Martelli. Don's with Snyder and Associates. They're a PR firm that's been working with the Society for about a year now. Don, take it away.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate the great intro. I'm here also with my colleague, Aaron Gouveia. Hello, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for taking your time today to get out of your busy schedule to join us and talk about working with the media. Today, here's a quick agenda, introduction of us, our work, defining the media, which has changed over the years, providing some interview tips, bridging tactics, the message pyramid, process, Q&A, and then there's some stuff that Dan would like to go through towards the end. So, unfortunately, Aaron's photo's not on here, but I am a former reporter for the Boston Globe. Covered business and politics for about 4 or 5 years for the paper. Since then, have worked in communications and public relations roles here in Greater Boston. We are an integrated media and communications agency headquartered here in town. We have been hired by the Society back in September 2015. And we've had some great relationships, and those have been built through with, partnering with Dan and previous president Tom Webster, who is our actually client at the College at Northeastern University, which is where we got introduced to all the great work that you all do within the Society. Now working with Lisa Kuhn, current president, and we're working with others as we go along. We're really focused on telling a good story and telling the story of the Society through the experiences of the members, which really boils down to your research. And I'm amazed at the level of research and the span of the research that you all conduct and how that will impact our everyday lives in a variety of ways today, in the future, and way down in the future. So for us, it's a very educative process where we're learning all the mechanisms, if you will, about biomaterials and all the little things all the nuances that go within it, and trying to, I guess, translate that to the media, who are not experts in your fields, that are not academics, and are trying to, again, translate your research into stories that would relate to your average newspaper or television viewer. And so with that said, our work really spans national media coverage, regional media coverage, local media coverage, and that is really, it depends on the types of news that we're dealing with, which we'll get into a little bit later. But we're also focused on the trades, as we call it. So these are periodicals that cover specific areas of biomaterial or science or healthcare in some way, shape, or form. So our job is to leave no stone unturned and try to get your research, your stories placed in a number of ways across the country and beyond. To date, just under a year, we've secured about 135 million media impressions, and that's been just because the stories that are coming out of our work are really interesting. I know that we've been able to equate some of Tom Webster's work to in nanomedicine, specifically towards how it could impact professional athletes' performance on the field and getting healthy through injuries. So our job is, again, to translate your great research and make it digestible via the consumer. So there's all types of media. When Aaron's also a former reporter, when we were in the newsroom, the newspapers would have 3 deadlines throughout the course of the day. The newspapers were 1.5 inches thick. Advertising, print advertising, was still sort of relevant. Not that it's not today, but it's not as much as it was back then. And the media landscape has really changed. There are blogs, there's social media. People are quoting Twitter, for example, as a news source, when back in our day, we had to sort of quantify and qualify the sources we worked with. So we define media as print, your sort of ink in your hands, if you will, broadcast, radio, podcasts, online news sites, influencers. So for example, I'm sure there's some of you on the call today or in the Society that have a fairly large following or sizable following in your space, and you are considered an influencer. And because of your reach through your work and your research and maybe what your personality or your channel through social media, you have a opportunity to influence your audience about the work you do. And of course, blogs. And our job is to figure out how we take all your research and the great stories that we can sort of create out of them and figure out ways to place them within any one of these mediums. We find that, in particular, dealing with print and broadcast is interesting these days, mostly because they're swamped with political coverage, and that they also have a responsibility to produce online video, also support their social media channels. So there's a number of opportunities for us to influence the media, but we have to get to the stories and find the right way to get that to them in a way that is contextual and adds relevance to what they'd like to focus on. In dealing with the media, we found that there are ways to make an interview interesting and make it relevant. It's all about preparation. So as we line up opportunities for you all, we'll be sure to provide you as much background as possible. Here's the producer you're dealing with, the reporter you're working with. Is it live? Is it in person? Is it print? Is it for online? Is it a podcast that's also being recorded through video? So we'll prepare you as much as possible through background materials and previous articles the blogger or the editor has produced, so that way you are prepared to address the questions he or she may ask you. And preparation is not about your research, because you know your research very well. It's about how do you provide context to that research so it is, again, digestible to the media entity you are working with at that time.
Yeah, and one thing to keep in mind, I know when people, especially people who aren't used to dealing with the media, first get in there, there's this idea that there's a gotcha moment, which does happen, but for the most part, these are going to be friendly interviews. You always remember, you are the expert. They need you a lot more than you need them. You are the mechanism for explaining what's going on. And if the reporter doesn't understand it, then he or she knows his readers or viewers aren't going to understand it. So you can be relaxed in that these are almost always going to be friendly, and that you're going to draw extensively from your background and expertise. You're going to relate to your research, and you're going to stick to the talking points that you've prepared in advance, and bridge back to them, which we'll talk about a little later, bridging.
It's important to also note that as you're being interviewed, whether it's with a print outlet or a television outlet, those formats will differ in terms of how you deliver your message. For example, if you're being interviewed by a print reporter, it may be recorded just to grab sound bites down the line and transcribe them, but it's really a conversation between two people that's relatively private, but it's not recorded. You're not on live TV, so your mannerisms and the way you approach the interview could differ. If you're on live TV, then obviously the camera is on, the lights are on, everything you say is then going to be broadcasted online, so you have to be cognizant of your body language, how you refer to the society, how you refer to your work, and think about how you're positioning yourself in front of that entity. In some cases, you'll be being interviewed for a TV outlet or a online blog or an online website that's doing video, but it's recorded, meaning they're getting sound bites, they're getting footage, which then will be packaged up for later, which gives you a little bit of wiggle room to redo an answer if you have to. For example, Aaron asked me a question, I sort of stumbled through it. I said, Aaron, if you don't mind, let me just give you another retake on that answer so I can be a little more clear about the point I'm trying to provide here. So again, our job is to prepare you as much as possible about the type of media entity you're dealing with, what the setting is, what the gist of the conversation will be, and provide you with some techniques to make the interview as fruitful as possible for you, to showcase your background, the college, university you're associated with, or industry or company you belong to, as well as the Society for Biomaterials, which is always pretty tough.
And I think this next part is going to be, if you take anything away from today, I personally hope it's this. You need to remember that when you are in the interview, there is no reason that you shouldn't have control. And I know that it can be very hard to feel that way if you have a camera aimed at you or if you're not used to the media spotlight. But, if you've been watching the presidential debates, and maybe this isn't the best example, but, last night they bridged a lot, and they were able to frame things in the way that they want because they're constantly trying to be in control. And that should be, you know, please don't say the things that either of them say, but you should have the control factor going for you too. So, you know, if someone asks a question that you don't know and you honestly don't know the answer, it is perfectly acceptable to say, you know, well, you know, so-and-so, that's not exactly my area of expertise. My research focuses more on, and then bridge back to your talking points. And speaking of those talking points, you want to have them, you want to know them, and you want to repeat them. And I understand that it will feel repetitive if you keep hitting on them. When that happens, repeat them again, because that is, you can't repeat your main talking points enough, especially considering that if you're in a print interview, you know, they may interview you for half an hour on the phone, and you might get one quote. So try and make that quote very usable and incorporate the most important information into it and stress it over and over again so that it's a better likelihood that that's what they're going to use. Same thing with a broadcast. You know, unless you're live, which is, you know, fairly rare these days. I think most of them are recorded. But, you know, in those interviews, you might be part of a larger segment. So a 3-minute segment, you might have 15 or 20 seconds or sometimes even less than that. So, you know, again, make sure you have your talking points. Make sure you hit them hard and hit them often. When you are talking, you need to be very cognizant of the fact that, please, we beg you, please identify yourself as a member of the Society for Biomaterials. That's incredibly important, and I know it's difficult because you want to talk about your research, you want to talk about, you know, all this exciting stuff that's going on, and we've seen a lot of times, you know, not with this group, but with other clients, there's a tendency to skip right to that stuff and kind of skip right over identifying yourself and aligning yourself with the society. So, for instance, you know, when they ask you about your research, you could say, well, yeah, actually, you know, in this research which I shared with the U.S. Society for Biomaterials, or which I did on behalf, you know, you make sure that you get that plug in there and that you get it in often. There's nothing wrong with that. You're kind of expected to be a little self-promotional here, so that is completely on the table and not a problem. But please make sure that you do your best to put it out there.
Yeah, I think that when we look at the membership base, it's pretty impressive in terms of the number of schools that are and professionals that are members, and the span of the research is just it's bleeding edge. And I think that there's a pride, if you will, to be a member of the society that has done some sort of interesting things on a global perspective. And our job is to promote that and amplify that message at times. But we're not the ones conducting the interviews, so we try to, you know, tee things up, if you will, and you folks can knock them out of the park. So there's an opportunity to plug the society. You know, please do, because that's truly you know, fantastic from I guess collectively our perspective, which is the whole point of us getting out there trying to get media coverage. Number 7 here, don't repeat a negative phrase. And I don't think we'll ever have an opportunity where we're positioning you all in a situation where it's a contentious media interview. But, you know, for example, if there's a story about cancer research and the reporter happens to dig a little deeper into the political side of cancer research and what's going on the Hill in D.C., and may bring up a sort of a contentious, you know, bill that's being proposed in one way or another, and they're trying to drag into that conversation. It's always best to sort of, you know, stay out of the weeds and not get caught up in that. And again, I think that 99% of the work we've done thus far has been all positive. Actually, I think 100% has been all positive. It's been really focused on promoting the research and then adding context to that research so the reader or the viewer or the listener understands the value of the society and the work you all do in the field. Tap into your enthusiasm. I think that oftentimes when we do work with you know, very smart folks like yourselves, you're so focused on your work. And you know, anytime I talk to Tom or Lisa Kuhn, I mean, the enthusiasm they have for their work is actually inspiring. I think that their passion for the things that they can change in society and the collaboration that they have with you all and others within the society is so impressive, and that energy typically tends to come out during these interviews. So don't forget to tap into that enthusiasm and just the collaboration and that experience you all share as members of the society, because that, again, adds more value to these interviews. And frankly, you know, if you have folks within the industry that are thinking about becoming members, your enthusiasm could influence them in that manner too, to sort of grow the membership base down the line. Looking good and sound good on camera. I think there's a reason why Aaron and I are not on video, because we have faces for radio. But looking good and sounding good on camera is sort of tricky. You know, again, very simple, basic tips, but you know, on TV, which they always say adds a few pounds to your waistline, if you will. But there are things, there's some no-nos, like, you know, very loud pattern type of shirts, which actually make the TV kind of jump a little bit. So in our preparation and helping you prepare for TV interviews, we'll give you some tips on, you know, the studio and how to deal with, you know, kind of bad lighting and things of that nature. So you'll be cognizant of that. And sounding good on camera is really about providing sound bites, because oftentimes if you're not live, you'll be recorded, and there's somebody who has to go through that footage and splice it up and make it part of the package. So you want to give your sound bites some airtime, you know, a second or two between your points. So as the producer is going through your conversation, they're able to take those sound bites and package them up as part of the overarching story without having to run off the end of a sentence, for example. Oftentimes you'll see, you know, as the sound bite tails off, the mouth is still moving, which means that the person never really gave their sound bites airtime. So it's important, again, to, you know, talk in, you know, short, digestible chunks, but give your talking points some airtime. Not rushing. I mean, actually, no, sorry. Don't feel like you know everything. Aaron put this out before. Stay in your sweet spot. You know your research. You know the context of your research. You understand, you know, the value that the work you do provides to the industry or to companies you may or partners you may work with. So stay in your lane. And if there's a reporter or producer who tries to steer you in a direction that you're not comfortable, you're absolutely well within your right to say, you know, that's a great question, Aaron. You know, you're probably best off talking to Tom Webster, one of my colleagues within the Society for Biomaterials. But today, I'd like to talk about X, Y, and Z. So again, feel free to stay in your lane. Don't feel like you need to know everything. Number 11, don't rush. Use that moment in time strategically. Don't feel like you need to rush to the talking point, or you'll get to a situation where you're just rambling on. So concise, clear, paced messaging always works best, especially when you're dealing with a reporter who just may not understand the work that you do and it doesn't understand the terminology. I mean, there are times when we are constantly asking Tom and Lisa and others, even Dan, to say, hey, geez, what does that acronym mean? What is this? Why is that important? Again, you're sort of translators when you deal with the media, and that's kind of, you know, how you should approach every opportunity we line up. And finally, most of you probably on the call are educators, and you spend a lot of time presenting your work or working with students or working in industry presenting your work. So think about these, whether it's a 2-minute interview or a half-hour interview or a live 3-minute interview, as a presentation, which means, you know, drive your point, provide some context or data as backup, and then come back to your point, which creates really great sound bites for the person who's interviewing you. So we always like to bring on and off the record and background, because it's one of those things that Aaron and I have dealt with from the journalist side, but also from the counsel side, being PR professionals. And, you know, Aaron always brings up a good point about, you know, it's best to clarify with a producer, an editor, if you are going to go on the record or off the record or background, that they agree to do so beforehand. I'll give you the definitions, and I'll let Aaron go into an example afterwards. But on the record means anything that I say to you in an interview can be used on in the piece or on the footage you're producing or the podcast you're producing. So anything I say, good and bad, can be used. Off the record means anything that I say cannot be used, and it frankly cannot be used to source it elsewhere or what have you. It's clearly off the record, off the table, cannot be used, period. On background, gets a little tricky. Background means if, you know, Aaron has a hot tip about a new drug that's being that could be disruptive in the cancer space that the FDA is considering. And he has a hot tip, but he really can't have that research attributed to him for a number of different reasons. He can call me up as a reporter for the Wall Street Journal and say, hey, look, Don, I have some really kind of interesting news in cancer research, but I'd love to kind of give it to you on background. And then if I agree to go on background, which Aaron will get to in a second, he can give it to me, which means as a reporter, I can take that information and do one of two things. One, I can either report that straight out, but say, sources say, comma, that X, Y, and Z company will be submitting to the FDA this new drug that will do X, Y, and Z. Or I can take that information, call the FDA, and say, hey, geez, you know, I have this on a reputable source that you're all considering the approval of this drug that could disrupt cancer research. Is that true? So again, not attributable to Aaron, but I can still use it in a way to create an opportunity.
Yeah, and just, you know, real quick on this. First of all, long story short, I would never, if it's something that you don't think you should say, just don't say it. With off the record, there's a tendency to, you know, when I was a reporter, someone came to me and said, well, off the record, and then blah, blah, blah. Well, all that stuff he said is actually on the record, because guess what? Reporters have to agree to go off the record. Without that agreement, then everything is really still fair game. Now, unless you got a real friendly and you have a high level of trust and a long relationship with the reporter, you know, you might not have to worry too much about it. But if it's someone that you've never dealt with, I would not be in the habit of just saying, you know, off the record and then just launching into it. You need to ask the reporter if off the record is acceptable, and if it is, then you'll make a calculated decision as to whether or not it serves your purpose to go ahead and do it. I would just recommend skipping that. You know, if it's not something you can say on the record, probably best not to say it.
And I don't think there's a situation where, since our dealings with the members of the society, that we've had a situation where we had to, you know, take this, you know, into consideration. All of our opportunities have been very proactive, positive, but it's always good, especially if you're talking about, you know, bleeding edge research that can make an impact in the industry in some way, shape, or form, and the reporter is really digging into, you know, the impact of your research and how it could either, you know, create more jobs, eliminate jobs, or debunk that research that's been, you know, the Bible, if you will, for the past 20 years, and that could be something that's a little contentious. So we've never been in that situation with any of our opportunities for SFB, but it's always good to, you know the terminology, just like you all know your terminology around your specific areas of expertise, which we're still learning. But it's always good to know the terminology and the nuances of on the record, off the record, and background when you're dealing with the media, just in case if it comes up. Because sometimes, you know, if the reporter is asking you questions you don't feel comfortable in answering, they may say, geez, you know, would you mind just discussing it on background? And you may not know exactly what that means, and you may have to define it. But again, like we said before, you are all in control of the interview and of the opportunity. So it gives you you have a moment to say, would you mind clarifying why you'd like to discuss some background and what exactly you're looking you to accomplish here, and how may I be of assistance? So just be cognizant of it, because it could come up from time to time. But again, in our dealings with you all, we don't see it being a situation that we have to, but just good to keep in mind. Talked a lot about bridging. It's fairly simple, but it's hard to do, if you will. I always like to bring up the Sunday morning talk shows. They do the political talk shows. If you watch any of those on any Sunday morning, any one of the national TV stations, you have these really smart, well-versed, messaged, polished politicians that will be asked a question, and then they'll bridge over something else that has either nothing to do with it or ignores the question altogether. So, for example, last night during the debate, the moderator was asking Hillary Clinton about the Clinton Foundation, and specifically about some, interesting quote-unquote dealings of the foundation. And she said, a very interesting question, but what I really like to talk about is about the impact the Clinton Foundation has had, in areas like Haiti. And she went on and on. So she basically ignored the question altogether, but bridged to a place where she wanted to discuss. So in this case, as you're being interviewed by a print reporter or a broadcast reporter about your research, and there's a situation where you feel the conversation is going down the path that either is not your sweet spot or doesn't really paint a decent enough picture, and you're getting a sense the reporter is not interested in or whatever, or they're just sort of distracted in some way, shape, or form. Always use these opportunities to bridge to a message that, as we said in the front end, you can repeat and create those sound bites. So if they're getting the weeds, tactics such as, it's a great question, Aaron, but I think we're probably better off speaking about X, Y, and Z, or, great point, Aaron. I think your question about your cancer research is important. but I think the current dialogue should be around X, Y, and Z. So being cognizant of your key messages and how you want to position your work, your research, and what sort of end result you'd like to get out of that one moment in time can be driven and can be successful by using bridging techniques.
Yeah, I think one quick example. We had a professor, one of our other clients who does a lot with robotics and advanced robotics, and one of the questions was, won't advanced robotics, when they take over jobs, won't they end up costing people jobs? And he got a little flustered, and and we coached the directors. The best response for something like that would be, well, let's think about all of the jobs that advanced robotics create on the other end, and go right from there into his messaging. So, is it a little bit of a dodge? Yeah, sometimes, but you're much better off pivoting to safer ground and sticking to your core messaging. That's always advisable.
The message pyramid. This is, back when I was a reporter for the Globe, Boston Globe, this is when digital pagination was just becoming, fairly popular across newsrooms. And what they would do before digital pagination is that they would print out everybody's article and they would fit them in the news holes that we were allotted, because advertising typically drives print coverage. And if your article was too long, if it was an inch too long, they would literally cut off the bottom of your article. And fast forward to today with digital technology, we're able to sort of manipulate content and images and things of that nature to make everything fit. But the point here is, in order for you as a writer to get to your point, you had to sort of follow this message pyramid. And it really applies to our thought leaders and folks like you within the society. Again, if you have 3 minutes for a TV interview, you don't have time to go into War and Peace. You have to kind of get into your research, provide the context and the value of the research and how it's going to impact, something that consumers can understand in a very concise, simple way. So this sort of message pyramid gives you a little bit of a framework on how to think about the sound bites you create in these moments in time. Aaron, appreciate the time. Really looking forward to understanding your work at Northeastern University College of Engineering in biomaterials. Can you tell me a little bit about your work? Thanks for the opportunity, Don. I'm really focused on cancer research here at Northeastern University. And by way of that, we have just been funded by the federal government to look into X, Y, and Z. And in fact, 1 out of 4 cancer patients could probably benefit from this type of treatment. So as you can see, I am giving a headline. I'm providing some facts and data that provide context to the research. And then if you have an example or a story, that's also a pretty interesting way to put your research into context. One of the things I like to bring up often is if you follow any of the national columnists for any one of the leading blogs or newspapers, what they'll typically do is they'll talk about really big contextual national trends, but they'll do so through the personal experiences of people they know or people they've interviewed. So if you're talking about somebody with Alzheimer's disease, they may tell that story about the importance of the research in that space, but they may do it through, Don Martelli, who's the adult child of a father who has Alzheimer's, and how he's struggling with care, and that he wishes the medicine available that was on the market was able to treat X, Y, and Z, and then back into the Alzheimer's research and medicines or treatments available to those that have it. So having an example of story, even some of the students you may work with at universities and the work that they're doing is a way to contextualize the research and the story. And then coming back to the bottom line, which is rephrasing the headline. So it's sort of like a big cycle. So provide the soundbite, provide facts and or data that back up the research or back up the statement you provided, an example or anecdote or a story that sort of visualizes what you're trying to say in this one moment in time, and then coming back to the headline. Again, a very methodical approach, and most people don't speak this way. I guess the professional thought leaders and those that do speaking tours are really great at it, but if you watch those Sunday morning talk shows, you'll see them do this very often, where they'll hit the headline, provide some facts and data, show some example and storylines, and then come back to the bottom line.
Yeah, and we understand that can be tough for people who are so research-driven and may have spent months or even years on something,
Yeah.
and now here you are with, you know, a minute or less to discuss it. And while that can be frustrating, that's just it, you know, as our local football coach says here, it is what it is. So you just have to, you know, what this boils down to is lead with your best stuff or your boldest claim, then back it up and prove it with data quickly and succinctly. Use a personal example if possible, and then at the end, put a bow on it, wrap it up, and just summarize everything you've just said. And that is by far the most successful formula for speaking with the media.
And this formula will differ based on the media you are speaking to. So if we create an opportunity with the New York Times, and it's going to be sort of a feature article, that's an opportunity that, you know, allows us to have some runway and provide some context and educate the reporter or the editor. If we are talking to a blogger who covers you know, chemical engineering, for example, or covers you know, biomaterials in some way, shape, or form, he or she understands your space, so may not need the context or the clarification. So again, you know, using this methodology, the pyramid, or the message pyramid, will differ based on the outlet you're speaking to, the format of that interview, and sort of the end goal. So if it's a television interview at a local TV station, that's one thing. But if you're talking to an industry trade who covers this stuff regularly, they'll have a deeper knowledge of the work and understand some of the nuances and terminology you may use during your conversation. So again, our job is to prepare you, line up the opportunities, prepare you for the format, and remind you of bridging techniques, using the pyramid, and other sort of tips and nuances that can make these interviews pretty fruitful for you, your college, university, or your company, as well as obviously the Society for Biomaterials. So the big question is, you know, great. You know, appreciate the feedback, appreciate the way to work with the media, but how do we get our stuff into the media working with Schneider? It's a pretty agile and fluid process, but to boil it all down, we have the email address at the bottom of the screen there. Typically what we'd like to do is get you on the phone for 20 minutes to a half hour and sort of conduct a session like this. Ask you about your background, ask you about your research, how that research fits into a context of a trend, or poking holes in your messaging a little bit to understand you know, how we can position your research best to get the types of media coverage that you'd like. And not to mention, we'd ask you, do you have experience with the media? Are you more comfortable with us penning articles for you to be placed in trades, or would you like to us take the stuff that you've already penned and place it for you? Do you prefer broadcast over radio, or are you uncomfortable with the podcast approach? So we'll kind of go through that, and you know, we can work through that process with Dan. But having those 20-minute conversations pre-interviewing you allows us to get a really good baseline of how we can work collaboratively with you to promote yourself and your research. And you know, there's two sort of sides of the house here, if you will. There's a proactive approach, which is sort of going through that process as we just discussed, promoting your research, promoting the context to which that sits, and then looking at the types of media we'd like to place. But also there's reactive. Just today, for example, one of the members of the society was quoted in the Boston Herald article that was about Joe Biden's visit to Boston, talking about moonshot and cancer research. And it was, I think, about an inch or so quote from the member, adding context and sort of academic context to the story that was, you know, playing out here in Boston. But that was an opportunity where the reporter from the Herald called us and said, geez, I know you guys work with the society. Do you have anybody within the ranks that can speak to, you know, cancer research and X, Y, and Z? And through our, you know, intake sessions and knowing who the players are, we're quickly able to take advantage of that opportunity. So it's a ping-pong effect, if you will. So if you have ideas, we'd love to get them as often and in any format as possible. I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions because you're a smart bunch, and we're trying to digest and translate what you do to the media. And then we will look for both proactive and reactive opportunities.
And one thing to keep in mind here, proactive media is great, and you know, in a perfect world, it works flawlessly, and we can bust through all the noise of the election, and we can get you placed on our terms. But more likely than not, we're going to be dealing with reactive media, which means something happens, something big in the news happens, and reporters need expert sources to kind of flesh out their story. And the biggest thing to remember in these instances is that speed is key. The first qualified person who can get to this reporter is likely going to be the one that the reporter uses, which is why, you know, we are obnoxious with our phone calls and follow-ups, because we know that time is of the essence with these opportunities, because reporters are all on deadline. There's fewer reporters than ever working at these, especially newspapers. Even though people are reading more news than ever, you know, the newspaper business especially is hurting right now, and so there have been massive layoffs, and there are fewer reporters than ever trying to write more news than ever. So time is absolutely of the essence, which is why, you know, we strongly urge you to be, you know, ready to go with these things as quickly as possible. And, you know, if they're in your wheelhouse, we hope that you will step up and be available and meet with these reporters as soon as possible, because that's who gets placements in these stories. It's the people who are the most responsive.
And our job is to sort of make that process as easy as possible. So in some cases, it may be the reporter would love to get just your feedback via email. So what we could do is we could facilitate the questions, you know, even write out some suggested talking points in advance. You know, we want to make it as easy as possible for you, which is why if we have these intake sessions, we're able to understand your expertise, your background, and how to get opportunities for you. But on the proactive side, you know, whether you have, you know, new research, if you have, you know, if you see trends in your space that, you know, we could leverage in any way, shape, or form, we'd love to explore those. And trends are, you know, typically, as you all know, bubble up in the industry, and then they eventually will hit mainstream media. But if you see that there's some trends emerging, we'd love to explore those with you and really try to figure out what context we can add to those trends to get coverage. You know, if there are society-based events or things you're doing from an event perspective that we can promote the society, that's also great. For example, you know, if you have an event on campus that's from the society perspective, and there's some, you know, there's Lisa or others that you have photos of, we can send those photos to the hometown media, or there's ways for us to use those photos as a post-event opportunity. So and other moments in time, if there are, you know, if there's anniversaries, or you know, a sort of a rehash of research, or there's a research that was pushed out a year ago that has come back to life in some way, shape, or form, we'd use that. So if at any time that you feel that you think you have something that should be promoted, and if that sort of prompts you to think about us or the society, it takes a quick phone call or an email to us for us to ask some questions, flush it out, and our job is simply to get it placed and create an opportunity for you all in a quick fashion. And it should be a fairly fluid process, and we'd love to, you know, hear from any and all of you on a regular basis, as I think we're here to help. I think that there's a thirst for this content on a regular basis, from, you know, business media, industry media, healthcare media, consumer media. I mean, there are consumer-based publications like Parents Magazine that, you know, could use some stories or ideas that focus on you know, the impact of research that you all are working on. So there's a number of ways for us to be creative and slice and dice, if you will, your research, and then try to figure out what's the best avenue for it to get replaced. And with that, I would like to, you know, if there's any questions, you know, we could open up the floor via the. Good, Dan.
I'd just like to direct the participants. There's a questions pane within the functionality of the GoToWebinar app application. The questions pane, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask the presenters, unfortunately our webinar service only provides for muted participants, so the questions pane is our only avenue to ask questions. If you have any questions, please type them into the questions pane. We'll give that just a minute to see if we have any.
Yeah, I think if there are folks that want to work with us or have some ideas, you know, if you can't get to us, you know, Dan is always, you know, Dan is one of our great clients, very super responsive to our needs, and again, our role is to make this as easy as possible as an opportunity for you, and it could be, you know, writing byline articles on your behalf, or op-eds. If you see something that's in the news that you have a different opinion on. We can help craft a letter to the editor, which typically are very short, 200-word pieces that we can place very quickly. So we will take any and all ideas, because our job is to, again, take your research, be creative, and figure out the execution of it from a media perspective.
So one of our participants has asked, do we have to talk to Dan before we get his approval to speak with Schneider? The answer is no. Schneider has great instincts about what is appropriate and newsworthy, and we have engaged them to help us get the word out about the society. So if there's something hot, as Don and Aaron just said, time is frequently of the essence. So I would encourage you to contact Schneider directly. If they have any concerns about this guy wants to say something weird, they'll get in touch with me, I'm sure. But no, there's no reason to contact me. If you want to approach Schneider directly, that's fine.
No, that's a good point, Dan. I think that we have such a fluid communications process that anytime we're contacted from a member of the society, we always include you, Lisa, and/or Tom in those communications. So even though we don't work for the society, we work on behalf of the society. We want to be an integrated member of your team and collectively for the society. That anytime an inquiry comes in through Dan or us, we're always information sharing. We do regular weekly, bi-weekly calls. So we're in constant communication, probably obnoxiously enough, but it's enough that if it comes in through Dan or it comes in through us, we're able to facilitate that pretty quickly.
Yeah, and that's, I would say that the best thing is just if you think you have a story, just call, because even if that doesn't turn out to be a story, I can't tell you the number of times that we have started talking to someone about one thing and then gotten to speak with them a little bit, dive down a little, and then we find a wealth of stories. And it's tough because I know a lot of you don't consider what you're doing is media worthy sometime, and we hear it and we say, oh my goodness, this is, yeah. I could do 5 pitches out of this. So, please, if you have any question at all, if you have any inkling that something might be a story, if you're wondering, just email us or call us, because we would love to talk to you, and it more than likely is a story.
It's an exploration of ideas. I mean, you all are exploring some pretty interesting things within your field of research, and our job is to sort of explore the context of that research and how it could apply to just the society in general, and again translate that. So anytime, I don't think we've ever gone on the phone with one of the members during one of those little intake sessions and not came out of it with ideas that could last us months and months and months. And some of them are more important than others, and some of them have a moment in time, like Joe Biden coming to Boston yesterday gave us a moment in time to create it. Some opportunities are what we would call long lead, meaning that it's a little bit there's some time that we can let this one marinate. We could plan for it to hit in around in a month or two. So we always like to find the news hook, and oftentimes, as Aaron pointed out earlier, with the media being so time-starved and short-staffed, they're so focused on breaking news, and breaking news happens all the time, either through social media, on their own blogs, their websites, and by the time that the newspapers come out tomorrow, it's already old news. So they're in this very competitive space where they have to get things out quick. So it's hard for them to focus on the stuff that's 2, 3, 4 months down the road. However, our job is to keep reminding them of it, and get them in the queue as often, as quickly as possible. So again, any and all ideas. There's no bad ideas, as we say in brainstorming. It's our job to help you ask the questions, decipher it a bit, and translate it for the media.
Another question, is there a link on the SFB website that lists all the Schneider & Associates outreach activities? Actually, there's not, but that's a fantastic idea, and I'll work with Don and one of his colleagues, Leah, to get that taken care of.
That's a great idea. I think that
we've done a number of both proactive and reactive things that should be could get some additional mileage on our website.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that sharing each other's info, like for example, if we're getting an article placed for one of your colleagues, it's always good to, even as Dan reminds us from time to time, as a society and members, you want to make sure you're sharing and tweeting content or posting it to LinkedIn or sharing it in other different ways. And so maybe there's a way for us to share our media tracker or share our activities so you can see the types of pitches we have in the field now, the types of coverage we secured, and you may see some of the coverage, and that could spawn an idea. So if you think that's a worthy exercise, we absolutely will do it.
Don, Aaron, thank you very much. I don't see any other questions in our pane. If I could just make a couple of brief announcements. Don, if I could ask you to just go to the next slide for me.
Yep.
If anybody has any suggestions for additional webinars, please don't hesitate to send them in. This is Dan Lemire. Send them in to me at dlemire@biomaterials.org or info@biomaterials.org, and we'll look to add those to our webinar calendar. We do have a couple of upcoming deadlines. The deadline for receipt of applications for both the C. William Hall Scholarship and the Cato Lorenzen Travel Fellowship. Pardon me.
I'm sorry, Dan. I think I gave you screen control.
That's all right. Thank you. Are you seeing my screen now?
I am.
Okay, great. So the C. William Hall and the Cato Lorenzen Travel Fellowship, the deadline for both of those is December 1st. They're both directed at undergrads. C. William Hall can go to any undergrad. The Cato Lorenzen specifically focused on underrepresented minorities. Both require just a brief statement of career aspirations and research interests, as well as transcripts. In addition, the Society's Tissue Engineering Special Interest Group is hosting a workshop at the upcoming Termis meeting on December 11th. This was organized by Elizabeth Kosger Fernandez and Siam Nukavarapu, Jeff Chacot, and Melissa Krebs. So please visit termis.org/AM2016 to register for that workshop. And last reminder, there is an abstract deadline coming up for our meeting in Minneapolis on November 7th. You can submit your abstracts at 2017.biomaterials.org by November 7th, and they'll be considered for placement in the final program. I did have a couple, one additional question pop up. Will you help us talk through a potential interview or how to give positioning statements?
Yes. So if there's an opportunity where you feel uncomfortable or you'd like to walk us through or have us walk you through the opportunity, we absolutely will love to do that. So if we're able to secure an opportunity, on a Wednesday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, for example, what we would do is we provide you with a briefing sheet, which provides you all the nitty-gritty details of the opportunity, who you're talking to, what he or she has written about or produced in the past that pertains to this subject, potential questions you may get. If we get the questions in advance, which is fairly rare, we'll try to, but if we can, we will. And then we'll provide you with some messaging, and we're more than happy to conduct what we would call sort of mini media training sessions, or sort of do mock interviews beforehand. And in some cases, we will even be on the phone with you or in person with you as you're doing an interview. So if there's any clarifications that need to happen or after action items like follow-ups, and don't forget to get them this link or these photos or this research study, we're more than happy to shepherd that process for you. So absolutely, we are not here just to get the coverage, but also to help you create the best opportunity as possible before you get on the phone or in studio with the reporters. So yes, we can help you do the message screening, the positioning statements, and things of that nature.
Don, Aaron, thank you both again so much.
No problem. It's been great. Appreciate it.
I'll have this webinar recording available on the website in the next couple of days. If you'd like to tell any of your friends or colleagues about it, they should be able to find it at biomaterials.org/webinars probably in about 48 hours. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day.
Great. Thank you.